The morning Professor Emran found the dog. It was raining sideways across Platform 3 of Valdenmere Central Station, and every commuter was looking at their shoes. The pup was silver, pale as winter birch, with storm-gray eyes that tracked Emran the way a compass needle tracks north. No collar. Treat. No name. Emran crouched, offered his hand, and the dog pressed its forehead against his palm, like it had been waiting for exactly this. He called him Kale. For 6 years the ritual was the same. Emran would rise before the city, and Kale would rise with him, and they would walk the 4 blocks from the blue house on Selden Row to the mouth of Valdenmere Central. Emran would descend to the platform, board the 714 to the university, and Kale would sit at the top of the station steps, still, silver, storm-eyed, and wait for the 609 return. Every evening the professor emerged from the crowd, and Kale would stand. And that was the whole transaction. No fanfare, just precision, just presence. Then, on a Tuesday in November, Professor Emran stood at a lecture hall podium, said the words, "The architecture of devotion is not." Stopped. His hand went to his chest. He was gone before the paramedics reached the building. Kale waited at the top of the station steps until midnight. Then he lay down. He did not leave. By morning, the transit authority had noticed. Officer Dresch, a wide man with a clipboard and a schedule to keep, crouched and pointed at the dog and said, "No animals on transit property without a handler." Kale looked at him with the gray eyes and did not move. Dresch called animal control. Animal control arrived, assessed the dog's absolute stillness, wrote, "Non-aggressive, no cause for immediate action," and left. A commuter kicked a coffee cup in Kale's direction and said something about strays. Kale watched the cup settle 2 feet away and looked back at the platform entrance. Professor Emran's family arrived on day 4. His nephew Aldrich and Aldrich's wife, Sen, down from the capital to see about the estate. They found Kale on the steps, and Sen said the dog was probably diseased, and Aldrich said it was a liability. They had the blue house emptied and contracted within 11 days. On day 12, Aldrich stood at the top of the station steps and told Kale, loudly, that the professor was gone and there was nothing left to wait for. Kale regarded him with the equanimity of a thing that has already weighed the world and found most of it very light. The city's councillor for public infrastructure, a man named Veth, signed a formal removal order on day 18. Animal control returned with paperwork. Kale allowed them to leash him. He walked 4 steps with them, sat down, and did not move further. The leash snapped taut. After 11 minutes, the animal control officer wrote, "Subject unresponsive to relocation attempts." Drove away. The commuters started calling him the ghost dog. Some photographed him, most walked past. A blogger called him a public health concern. A satirical city account posted a poll. Remove the dog or leave the dog. 62% said remove. Kale sat in the autumn rain and watched the 714 depart, and then he watched the platform for the shape that no longer came. System, Vigil Protocol. Day 100 loyalty resonance threshold reached. Field, active. Range, 8 meters. Effect, pretension suppression. Sustained proximity strips performative effect. Duration, permanent and cumulative. Nobody felt it on day 100. The field was thin, a pressure you might mistake for conscience. A man who had been planning to lie to his wife about where the household money had gone sat on the station bench to check his phone, spent 12 minutes near Kale, and went home and told her everything. He didn't know why. A city junior clerk who had been co-signing forms her supervisor had forged found she could not sign the next one, put it down, reported the supervisor. Small things. The kind of things people later attributed to stress, or weather, or a change in diet. By day 300, the field had widened to 30 meters, and the effects were harder to explain away. A developer, who had been using the station's commercial tenants as a pressure scheme to force rent hikes, walked through the plaza on his way to a meeting, got 12 steps past Kale, turned around, looked at the silver dog sitting in the cold morning air, and called his lawyer instead to begin a correction of every fraudulent lease clause. He told the journalist, who later asked him about it, "I don't know, I just couldn't keep walking." It was a 19-year-old commuter named Mira who began recording. She rode the 714 every weekday to her design program at the Polytechnic, and she had noticed The way a person with a quiet mind notices things, that the air around the station steps was different. Not warmer, not louder, different the way a tuning fork makes a room different when it's rung. She started a journal, then a video log. She documented what she observed. People slowing down near KL. People stopping mid-conversation. People abruptly changing direction as if a thought had landed on them. She posted it without a title on day 340, and it was shared 400,000 times in 6 days. The comment that got the most traction said, "He's not waiting for a dead man. He's holding a frequency the rest of us lost." 412, Aldrich returned to Valdenmere. He had heard about Mira's footage and came to dispute it, to stand at the top of the station steps and be publicly reasonable to say the dog was an animal, and sentimentality was not civic policy. He had a journalist with him and a prepared statement. He stood 6 meters from Kale and began to read from it. He got through 2 sentences. Then something in his chest went wrong, not cardiac, not physical, just the quiet, devastating surfacing of every self-serving decision he had made in the 11 days after his uncle died. The house cleared in 48 hours. The furniture sold before the funeral arrangements were complete. The dog, his uncle's dog, left on a set of public steps in November. He did not finish the statement. The journalist asked him to continue. Aldrich said quietly, "I should have taken him home." He walked to the top of the steps, sat down beside Kale, and put his face in his hands. Kale pressed his forehead against Aldrich's arm the way he had once pressed it against Emran's palm. The journalist published it all. System Vigil Protocol, Day 600 Loyalty Resonance, Intensified. Range, 80 meters. Secondary effect, Clarity Amplification within range. Concealed motivations surface involuntarily in sustained speech. Cumulative field integrity, 87%. Day 1000 threshold, approaching. Officer Dresch came back on day 588 with a new removal order. Counselor Veth had pushed it through a second time, citing the increasing crowds and the disruption to normal transit flow. Dresch parked his vehicle, walked to the steps, unfolded the order, and stood within the field for 4 minutes before he understood he was not going to execute it. He stood there for another 9 minutes. Then he folded it back up, returned to his vehicle, and drove to the Transit Authority offices. He submitted a written statement recommending the immediate annulment of both removal orders on the grounds that the animal poses no public safety risk, and the removal attempts constitute an administrative overcorrection, driven by Councillor Beth's pending commercial redevelopment interests in the station's northern plaza. That last part surprised Dresch as much as anyone. He hadn't known he knew it, he did. The annulment was published the same week. Councillor Veth declined all comment. Mira kept filming. A documentary crew came from the capital. Professor of animal behavior from the university, Emran's own department, published a paper. None of them could explain the field scientifically. All of them noted the same thing. Within a certain radius of the Silver Kita, on the steps of Valdenmere Central, people told the truth. Not big confessional truths, just the real version of the thing they were about to say instead. The city began to change in small, to quantify ways. Contract fraud in the transit precinct dropped. Public meeting attendance rose. A neighborhood association 3 blocks from the station, whose treasurer had been quietly misallocating funds for 4 years, voted him out on day 724 after their monthly meeting, which they had, uncharacteristically, decided to hold on the station plaza. Kale sat through all of it. Still silver, storm-eyed, watching the platform entrance. The 6-9 came every evening and disgorged its passengers. And Kale would track the crowd for the shape that did not come. And then the crowd would thin, and Kale would lie down, and the night would settle over Valdenmere, and in the morning he would be there again at the top of the steps before the first train. Day 1. Kingston was a Thursday in autumn. Cold clear, the kind of air that may look like a photograph of itself. System, Vigil Protocol, Day 1. Undying Vigil, crystallized. Station Plaza, full coverage. Effect, absolute clarity field, duration, permanent. Loyalty resonance, peak expression. Locked. It happened at 7:09, 5 minutes before the first departure. The field did not crack open or flash or announce itself. It settled, like a chord resolving. Every person in the plaza, 214 commuters, 3 transit staff, a documentary crew, Mira with her camera, Aldrich, who had come back that morning without knowing why, and Councillor Veth, who had arrived to give a press statement about unrelated infrastructure funding, felt it simultaneously. A stillness, not silence, a stillness underneath the sound. Councillor Veth was mid-sentence to a camera when the field crystallized. He stopped. The camera kept rolling. And in the absolute clarity of that moment, with 200 people watching, and the documentary crew's directional microphones live, he said, slowly without apparent intending to, that the Northern Plaza redevelopment contract had been awarded to a firm in which he held an undisclosed stake, and that both removal orders for the dog had been issued to clear the steps so construction survey teams could begin preliminary access without public obstruction. The camera kept rolling. By noon, it was on every city feed. By 3 p.m., the ethics committee had opened a file. By 6 p.m., Veth had resigned. Aldrich sat on the top step for the third time, and this time he stayed through the morning rush and the lunchtime rush and the evening crush and the 6 and 9. He watched the crowd pour through the platform exit. He watched Kale track it. He watched the dog's gaze move, precise and unhurried through every face. Looking. Still looking. He's still waiting for him, Mira said beside him. I know, Aldrich said. The city's mayor came to the station on day 1008. Not with cameras. She came early, before the commuters, and sat on the top step with a cup of tea she didn't drink, and looked at the silver dog in the cold morning air. After a long time, she said, to no one in particular, what does it mean to be this loyal to something? And the field did not answer, because the field was not an answer. It was just the question held in the air, undeniable. The monument was unveiled on day 1031, a silver Akita in cast iron at the top of the station steps, life-size, storm-eyed facing the platform entrance. The plaque read, KL who waited, and in waiting held us to account. At the unveiling, 300 people stood in the plaza. Aldrich spoke. Dresch spoke. Mira's documentary screened on the station's external facade. The mayor lit the unveiling lamp. KL sat beside the monument and watched the platform entrance. The 609 came in at 6:11, 2 minutes late, a signal delay at Crossgate, and the passengers poured through the exit in the particular way of evening commuters. Heads down, momentum up, the whole familiar arithmetic of people returning to their lives. Kale stood. He watched the crowd thin. He watched the last stragglers pass. He watched the posh platform go quiet. Then he lay down at the foot of the iron statue, rested his chin on his forepaws, and kept his eyes on the entrance. The city moved around him. Loud, lit, shifting, full of its small negotiations and compromises and recalibrations. And Kale held perfectly still at the center of it, the fixed point, the frequency the rest of them had lost, and kept finding their way back to. The gap was not between his power and their suffering. It was between his constancy and their motion, and it was absolute. And it was permanent, and every person who had ever tried to move him from those steps knew it now without being told. He was not waiting because he did not know. He was waiting because he did. And that was the rarest thing the city had ever seen, and they would not forget it, and they did not deserve to.